The world needs this podcast.
Yeah,
Since we're super well known, people are going to flock to this.
oh my goodness! Look out, Joe Rogan.
All right, I'll make an intro. This isn't pre-prepared, so I'm shooting from the heart.
Yeah.
This
Authentic.
is yes, exactly. This is my friend Aaron Troyer. I met Aaron Troyer 12, 13 years ago when I was probably a sophomore in college or a junior maybe. And he was in this rad band called Come Wind. And he shredded on guitar. And initially I thought that's all he does. Then he opens up his mouth and starts singing. And I'm like, what is happening right now? The most buttery, incredible voice ever. Okay, so fast forward, our bands, well, my band broke up first, then his band toured for a while, and then they went on hiatus, and then he comes out with a record under the moniker The Blue Winter. Absolutely phenomenal songwriting. And then he teases us with that and then goes quiet for a little while because he has a family and a life. And then he comes out with a new record at the end of 2022. Is that when it came out? Right? Mm-hmm. Volume 2 from The Blue Winter. And again, absolutely blew my mind from production and songwriting standpoint. So there is so much more than meets the eye with this gentleman that we are going to discover today. And I'm so excited. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. I honestly feel honored that you'd want to talk to me. So we'll see what we get into.
Yeah, I don't know how to make this not just the traditional, like, tell me your childhood story. So I was thinking about where to start today. And
Sure.
I'm very much aware, or I've become aware, that you sort of stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Like your dad
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and potentially other family.
Oh, yeah.
You come from like legend musician family. Your dad's a steel player, right?
Yeah. So, my pretty much entire family does music in one way or another. So my dad, is, I've said this on different things in different articles before, but my dad is still, to this day, like one of the best musicians I've ever met. And I don't just say that like because he's my dad. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but he plays steel guitar, like acoustic electric guitar, bass. He plays mandolin, banjo, like a lot of stuff. And it's bizarre because, you know how? Okay, so I would call myself a guitar player. Yes, I do play a little drums. I do play a little piano, things like that. But I'm still a guitar player. So it's the kind of one of those things where whenever I play piano, it kind of sounds like a guitar player playing piano, you know?
Same.
When my dad does those things, when he plays banjo, it sounds like a banjo player.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So he's like wildly skilled, and he owns a music store. But even like my aunts and uncles, especially on my mom's side of the family, like they're all musicians. They all played. So it's kind of like a thing that I was just, born into, that music was always around. Was never pushed on me or my sisters. I have 2 older sisters. Was never a thing where my parents expected us to play or anything. I just remember, I was like 6 years old or something, and I was like, I'd really like to take guitar lessons. I'd really like to do that, So it was like my choice, and I think actually, if you asked my dad, I think he would say, when I asked my parents to do that, he didn't really want to be the one giving instruction. Like he taught lessons, but there's like a weird, like, you want to help your kids like do that stuff, but I think he was afraid of what that would do to like relationships and stuff. But I did end up taking lessons like proper. I would go to the store, do a lesson with him for a lot of years. And it was actually like amazing, I think, for our relationship, because there's like a connection there of years and years of my life. Every week you'd have like some time where it was just him and I like working on music stuff. So yeah, that was like a lot of my, upbringing was, being born into a field of musicians, and spending a lot of time with my dad, like learning how to play guitar and stuff like that. So
Did he tour? Was he like a session guy or?
So he would have done like a decent amount of session work. I think the one thing, I think I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago, but I think the one thing that my dad and I both have in common is the like touring thing, like doing lots of gigs and shows. It's just not what I love about music. Don't get me wrong, I think performances are awesome, but I never really like talked to him a whole bunch about like why didn't he do more? Because he's absolutely good enough to do the Nashville thing and like play on people's records.
Yeah.
And, I think if you asked him, I think he doesn't love. I think he still likes doing the occasional session job where he can like pop into a studio, rip some tracks, get out. So this is bizarre, and it's still kind of bizarre to me to this day. He loves teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm pretty sure if he could retire and not like have all of his needs met, he would just still teach people. Like,
wow.
I've met some good, music instructors, but it's a thing where I feel like he wakes up in the morning and he's like, this is what I want to do. This is like, I'm happy to do this. So I think for him, it was like, well, if I like doing this thing, why would I like go on tour and be away from my family and, like do, one night here and one night there and one night here, when I could just like do this other thing that I really love.
Yeah.
And have,
and be home at night.
Quote unquote, more of a normal life. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he like did some of that stuff, but I don't think it was ever like a big driving force to do that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think, at least. I don't want to speak for him, but yeah.
So, does he also sing?
Not really. Like he can absolutely carry a tune, and if you needed him to sing a song, he would absolutely do it. But that has never been his thing of like, I'm going to sing this song. I have really no idea where the singing for me came from.
Well, yeah, obviously because, so, sorry, what's your dad's name?
Rick.
All right, Rick, if you're watching this, I promise I am going to talk about Aaron, but you're such an integral part in Aaron's life. I was wanting to know, like, between the songwriting and singing part, mm-hmm. When did that come into play for you?
Yeah, dude. So that's the thing where it's still kind of a mystery to me, and there's lots of things for like guitar playing and piano playing where I just worked really hard. I've always been the kind of like person and student in school and stuff where I may not get things like immediately as quick as other people, but I'm going to work crazy hard to do it the best I can. So for guitar, like a lot of the things that I can do that I feel like help me on a day-to-day basis, I worked really hard to be able to do that behind the scenes. Singing is like a thing where like, I mean, I have worked hard, but I feel a little spoiled because I started singing in Come Wind, the band that you were talking about, when we had a discussion and there was like one of our EPs has zero harmony. Like there's only one voice. Like the entire 6 songs, there's only one. And we had a discussion of like, man, it'd be really nice if like, somebody could sing something. And then I remember like sending, at the time a little garage band demo or something of like me singing a song to the rest of the guys and saying like, I could probably do this. And it was like some song, really preliminary, like quote unquote songwriting. It wasn't like, a full song, but it was just like, here's an idea. And they were really into it. And then we started writing songs where it was like trading like split vocal kind of things.
Yeah.
And again, don't get me wrong. I try my best to work hard at singing better and better, even like today. But at the same time, at that point I was never in choir. I was never like doing lessons. I was never singing with other people. I just kind of started singing and that's what came out. I'm always extremely hesitant when people are like, "Hey, so can you give me some advice on like being a better vocalist?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I don't even know what I'm doing, so I don't know that I'm going to steer you in the right direction."
Yeah. So that would have been early 20s or late teens?
Yeah. Like probably like, Yeah, like probably early 20s, like 20, 21, somewhere around there. Like, don't get me wrong, I would, sing along with songs in the radio
Yeah.
and stuff, but I'm like a pretty introverted person, so at the time, the idea of like being even more the center of attention was like, yeah, I'm going to avoid this until I have to.
But so songwriting had come into play as well. So you had written a song and sung in a garage, did a garage band thing. So, and sent it to the dudes.
Yeah.
So was songwriting a thing far before singing was for you?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think it definitely was. I think a lot of times these days when I think of songwriting, what the image that comes to mind is people like Bob Dylan, or like people who they have an instrument, they have some words, they put them to a melody, they do the whole song, right? At the time, I would have been in bands that were super like music first. You write the instrumentation first. So I would have done tons of like, composing for that kind of stuff all the time, like just constantly playing guitar and working out like, oh, this is a cool music idea that we can connect to this idea, and then we can go to this idea. So I would have done tons of that all through high school.
And that was like the post-hardcore, hardcore world.
Exactly.
Under Oath always wrote that way, if I remember right, which I think is maybe a mutual influence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Dude, I remember being in high school and one of my friends showing me an Under Oath record, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest.
Yeah, 2004 was when They're Only Chasing Safety came out, and that was it for me.
Yeah. So those kinds of ideas, I think I was doing for a really long time. They were like, I still, sometimes I get nostalgic and I listen to those old recordings and stuff. They're not like super mature, but at the same time, I put a lot of thought at the time into what are these riffs and melodies and cool things in the background going to be. So it wasn't like, traditional modern, this is what a songwriter is kind of stuff. But at the same time, I had spent a lot of time trying to think about how can I make music, my original sounds that are special to me. You know what I mean? I think what we were talking about, like in my 20s, 2021, like that era of my life, then it started to be, well, how would I do this with a vocal melody as well? Like, how would I do the stuff I'm already doing, but also introduce like a vocal melody in there too? So
yeah,
a little bit of like those two worlds colliding at that point. So
yeah, that's a really, really interesting take on getting started on songwriting. Right. For me, it was maybe the exact opposite, where guitar was my instrument, but like rhythm is my thing. And my initial influences were, early days were like OC Supertones, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Audio Adrenaline, and Newsboys, then Reliant K and Switchfoot. So those guys a lot of those guys took a more traditional sit down with an acoustic and write, a song.
Just for the record, still think. So I would have grown up a little different, like musical background. Like my favorite bands when I was in like pre-high school was like Led Zeppelin and classic guitar rock bands. But to this day, still John Foreman, like I think as a songwriter, still way up there. In terms of skill and just I didn't want to interrupt, but no, I still think that I think that there's a lot of people that view him and Switchfoot as like, oh, you guys like just a CCM artist or whatever. But I think John Foreman is up there with a lot of like amazing songwriters that I've heard. Anyway, didn't want to interrupt.
I totally agree with you, and that's what drew me to him. And my only mechanism was I play rhythm guitar and sing a little bit. And I have these deep yearnings in my heart that have to come out. In your case, coming from like an instrument first, then superimpose melody, then figure out maybe what it is you're going to... Like, what was your driver when it came to writing songs? What did you want to write about? Or was that a thought?
No, this is great. And I think... I know it's weird to say this, but I think that one of the coolest things about music and about songwriting is I'm pretty sure your approach and mine come from a way different starting point.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, we're like trying to do the same thing, you know? So for me, one of the things that I for sure at that time would have inherited like from my dad is it was always like when you listen to a song on the radio, like the thing was the music is first. I think like a lot of the world, like when you listen to a song, the lyrics are like, yeah, does it have a good melody and can I tap my foot to it? Like that's the number one. And I think for us, that was like growing up, that was a big deal. It was like,
Yeah.
I care about what the music's doing and less about what the words are. And, you know, I think that early on, like I would have some, you know, again, like I said, I'm a very introverted person, so I think a lot. I have like lots of, I wouldn't say I'm a super intellectual person, but at the same time, I think a lot about, you know, somewhat profound things, like somewhat deep things that are really, that I'm really passionate about. And a lot of times that would be the focal point of songs. Like, especially early days, there was not like a lot of love songs or things like that. It was like, these are like things that I'm going through, that I'm trying to figure out, that I'm wrestling with, things that I'm struggling with. Like those were like the essential points of the songs that I would write. I think mid-20s onward, I got into some artists, modern and, you know, of previous eras that were more, again, traditional songwriters. Not necessarily huge artists, but just people that I liked just listening to this song that they wrote on an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And the melodies were great and the guitar was great, but the story that they're telling, the emotions that you feel like from what they're describing did something beyond just, oh, I'm tapping my foot to this song. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think both of those things go hand in hand. I think the music that you're writing and also the lyrical like intent and like what you're trying to put in, one without the other. It's not like, you know, if 90% of your focus is just lyrics, it's, you know, you're like borderline, is this music or is it like poetry?
Right.
But on the flip side, if it's all disco beats and no context, I don't have an emotional connection with what's going on either.
Right.
And I think what's cool about music is people have a different scale of, some people will do a little bit of, you know, one side is heavier than the other and then the other one will do the opposite. And I kind of think that's great. I think like, this sounds wild, but I think that more people should learn how to write songs because I think the like greater scheme canvas of music gets way cooler then.
Yeah.
Because, you know, what you're going to write and what I'm going to write are going to be different.
Yeah.
But that's awesome because then I can start getting a deeper perspective for like what motivates you and what's exciting to you that's different from what's exciting to me. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So, yeah. Went off on a little tangent.
Well, I like that. It made me think of this conversation I had yesterday with my friend Jarrett Klein, songwriter. He's working on a record, and I asked him, how many songs do you have that are done? He said, ooh, I don't know. I have to count. He said, I have a lot of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so where are you getting stuck? He said, usually the choruses. He says, I write verses, and then I think, oh, man, now I got to write a chorus, and it has to be catchy.
Yeah.
And I felt this righteous indignation rising up in me, saying, who said that to you? That is the saddest thing ever, that there would be any number of people out there who can write songs and want to write songs and are being stopped by this notion that they're paralyzed, that I better not write it if it's not catchy. And I said, how about we change that, you know, how about we change that plumb line to, does it move me or do I like singing it?
Mm-hmm.
And because isn't it more important that the songs you're writing are moving you in some way in the moment? Isn't it more important that you're expressing yourself? I think that our social media, our culture, our high performance culture that we've created, it does sort of, it's created this if it's not catchy, don't do it. Fire your chorus and make it your verse and write a new chorus. And all those are great exercises. I mean, there's nothing wrong. We should want to write good songs. But like you said, I think more people should write songs. For me, it's like breathing. It's like the only thing that's ever made sense to me to get something off my chest, to say something. When people look back, when they find my journals, if I don't burn them before I die, they're going to be super, 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 super unimpressed with my actual journals that are just me probably crying out to the Lord, being like, God, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. Not poetic at all.
Yeah.
But they might look at my songs and say, wow, he was really trying to say something here. And so, I told my friend, I said, dude, finish the song and judge it later. Just write it and ask the question, do I like singing it? Mm-hmm. Do I like doing this? Mm-hmm. And if you do, then keep doing it. And we can assess whether it's catchy later. We can tweak it later. You can write a new chorus later. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. It is such a powerful way to communicate. Mm-hmm. And whether anyone hears it or not, I always say it's worth it intrinsically. Now, that said, as a 13-year-old writing songs, what would happen for me was I would be sitting in my room for hours. There would be company over, and I would bring my guitar out, and I would say, can I play you all a song? And now I don't know what possessed me to do that, but it just seemed
that's
like
wild. So that's not actually for songwriters at a young age. That's not wild. For me, that sounds like a crazy thing because I already said I still don't love being center of attention. So that would have at a young age terrified me. Like the idea of being like, let me put this really vulnerable thing in front of all of you would be like, I don't want to do that. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I don't know what possessed me to do it. It was just the thing that made sense to do after writing a song. And it was clearly what my influences were doing by making CDs, etc. And I didn't have a way to do that. So I thought, what better way than to share it with people and get some feedback?
Sure.
And I think even now, in the last couple of years, maybe I've slowed this down a little bit because I hold things a little closer to the vest. But even in the last 10 years, anytime I'd make a demo, I'd send it to someone. Not for accountability, but it was kind of a built-in accountability. And it was a way to say, hey, I created something. This didn't exist 3 hours ago, and now it does. So I don't know where this was going. You sparked this memory of this conversation with Jarrett, and that's where that went. For you, when you started writing songs and you shared it with the band, do you remember the first time you played one of your songs and sang with Come Wind, or like?
I do actually. I remember for one of the EPs.
Come here, bud.
What's up, dude?
You're gonna have to say hi since you opened the door. Come here. Come in. I know you do, but I know, but not since you opened the door. I want you to say hi.
You're in it now, dude.
Come here, bub.
You're in now, dude.
Then you can. Where are you gonna go to the bathroom or something?
Yes, I'll just go to the bathroom.
This is Gabriel.
What up, dude?
All right, go to the back. Can you shut the door? See you, bud.
Dude, opening the door and then saying, I'm not supposed to be in here is the most, classic child thing of
classic 4-year-old.
I know the rules, and I'm not technically breaking them because I'm not in this room, but I'm not supposed to be in here.
I'm not supposed to be here. I'm telling you as I'm breaking the rule that I know that I'm breaking the rule.
I love it. I remember we were writing some new songs for a potential new EP or full length or whatever it was going to be. And I had written, so we were trading vocals back and forth, and I had written something where I had written all the words and the chorus and most of, bass lines and things like that. And
what song was that? Is it out?
Yeah, so it's off of a little EP called "Grow My Roots."
Yeah.
And it's a
Love
song
that
called,
record.
so the first one that I remember doing is a song called "Steady," and it
Mhm.
was like lots of drums and cool stuff. And I had wrote everything, and thankfully, like Nick, the other guy that sang like lead vocals, had no issue with like I just said like, hey, I wrote these things. Here's the melody I was thinking. Do you mind singing these parts and I'll sing these other parts? You know what I mean? So he would like sing a lot of the verses. I would sing the chorus, like stuff like that. And I do remember like I don't remember where it was, but I remember like the event that we played where we like played that song. I don't know that I have like tons of emotions. This is like an anticlimactic story. I remember like being pretty nervous because I just was not I would at that point never have called myself a singer. You know what I mean? And I just remember being a little nervous to like actually do that, and singing at a live thing with monitors and stuff is such a different experience.
Yeah.
But I remember like really enjoying it, and like despite the fear behind doing that vulnerable thing, I do remember like wanting to do it more and
Yeah.
wanting to like, okay, let's do this again.
There's some catharsis around it.
Mhm.
And I
Yep.
think that's what I didn't know how to describe. But yeah, I wondered if you felt that way. Like once people started reacting to your songs and lyrics.
Yeah. There's a weird thing, man, that I know that people do this on a different scale for each person, but when you start writing a song and you start creating art, a lot of it is for yourself.
Yeah.
But then once it's done, there is a pretty strong desire of like, you don't need it to connect with other people because it's a lot for you, but you do kind of want it.
Yeah.
And not in like a prideful way, just like, man, this means a lot to me. It would be cool if it meant a lot to you too.
This,
You know what I mean?
Our shared reality. I mean, John Foreman says it best. He says, I'm like trapped in this prison, this cage. I feel like he has at least 10 songs from his career where he talks about this being trapped in this sort of human experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is that we're trying to share and connect with. I feel.
Yeah. So one of the things you said earlier, I think about a lot. For me, I think one of the motivations early on, I still think about this sometimes, but I'm not the greatest. I've gotten better at it over the years, but I'm not the greatest like communicator on earth. And like sometimes even in conversations with some of my best friends who I have long-standing relationships, my brain will just move too fast, and I'll like the idea that's in my head, I'm trying to get out so bad, but it just comes out blurry, and it's hard for people to understand. I think one of the coolest things for me about songwriting is if I'm trying to describe this thing, I can spend the next week finding the right words to describe this thing. Sometimes it's hard because, you're a songwriter, you understand. Sometimes like the music that you're doing, maybe you only have like 4 lines to describe this exact thing.
Yeah.
And you have to like do that in an artistic way, but in a way that helps people understand exactly what you're feeling. But for me, I think part of it was I could spend a month figuring out exactly how to say this in a way that makes sense. And I don't have to do this like rapid fire, let's make it up right now. You know what I mean? That conversations have to do. And I think that was kind of a cool thing for me to realize I can communicate these ideas and hopefully say exactly the words that I want to, you know what I mean? And not feel like I have to, come up with them on the spot. I can describe for you exactly what's in my head and take as long as I need to get that idea out. And I think I still think about that sometimes, like that's a motivation for me personally in songs that I don't get to do in day-to-day life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
I resonate with that in a huge way. In fact, I realized early on in my songwriting that if I tried to write a song, let's say I got in some fight with a girlfriend or whatever, if I tried to write a song immediately after that in the heat of the emotion, the song was total trash because I couldn't see past my feelings.
Right.
But if I waited long enough to try and make sense of something that had just happened, I could do exactly what you're saying, spend a week or a month, sometimes longer,
Oh yeah.
describing this one feeling I had or this one piece of my miserable existence, trying to get it out there And I totally agree. I resonate a lot, which is why I've mentioned several times, even with this podcast, that it's so difficult for me to be precise in real time. It's so hard. But songwriting has given me an opportunity to say things about the world that I could never dream of just, off the top of the dome, live in front of a camera.
And
God bless the people who can, but I can't.
That's what I'm saying. I think that the more people can do a little bit of songwriting, there are people that can do that, and they do it really well.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, but there are people that do that great. There's also people who like taking, I said a month. I've been stuck on songs for months and months and months and months and months.
Yeah.
There are people that love doing that process too. I would fall more into that category of just you labor over this thing and you try to get the right words to come out and introduce it in an artistic way. But that's, again, I think that's what's so cool is not everybody's going to do that stuff the same. I'm sure, I can't think of any, but I'm sure that there would be people that in the heat of the moment, that's when they work best. And they can just channel this, I'm in this really emotional state, and they just jot it down, and all of a sudden it's amazing. I can't do that either, but I'm sure that there's people that can, and I think that I think it's always hard talking about, how do you write songs? How do you do this? What's your process? Because I've firmly stood in the camp of I don't really think that there's this is the way you do it.
Right.
I kind of think that if you come up with something that means a lot to you and sounds cool, any way that you get there, I think is the right way.
I agree with you. Block everything else out. Doesn't mean you have to stop listening to music or other people. There's definitely a balance of having enough input to inspire you. But I remember in high school, I had this guitar teacher who basically he said, if you're not going to listen to Christian music, I don't want you listening to any music at all.
Bold.
Now, it was already kind of my upbringing that I couldn't listen to anything else. But at that point, I was getting pretty sick of who I had, in my CD collection. So I actually did take a season to not listen to much music, and that allowed me to write some of the first songs some of the songs that were on my first record. And I noticed something about that where I started utilizing blinders. In seasons of big creativity for me, when I'm making a record, it doesn't serve me well to be listening to too many reference tracks. It doesn't serve me, the writing process, to be doing that, because I need to put the blinders on and say what I need to say without these preconceived notions of it having to be one way or another. Has to be catchy. Well, who says that? Mm-hmm. Who made that rule? I understand that people gravitate towards certain melodies and whatnot, but again, who says that when I sit down in the privacy of my bedroom to write that that's what it has to be? Who says it has to be verse, chorus, verse, bridge, whatever? We make our own rules, and thankfully we're starting to have examples of people who have made their own rules who blew up. 21 Pilots was that, who you guys toured with.
Yep.
He said, no, I'm not going to change the songs to fit your traditional format. And, just look at me now. And I agree that if more people would feel the freedom to put on some blinders and say what's in their heart, I think that they would just feel this sense of accomplishment when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
That I made something. It didn't exist before, and now it exists. And anything we do is going to be derivative of something else.
Yeah.
We acknowledge that. But we also don't get trapped in this sea of preconceived expectations of what it has to be. I think if you can free yourself of that, you can make something. And maybe you sit down to write a song and you end up writing a poem. Or you sit down to write a song and you end up getting a vision for a painting. I just think that having any sort of creative output and flow, even if you're the most, is it left brain or right brain that's more?
I do not know.
Yeah, we're not neuroscientists over here. Okay?
Definitely not.
Mere Northeast Ohio songwriters. But if you're a more analytical person, Even spending time creating something is worthwhile, and it will feed your analyticalness, I think.
Yeah, I think so. When you were talking about that, I think one thing that makes it hard, that I have found myself really trying to be better at, that has very little to do with my own songs. I think part of the reason people are a little afraid to do that is because right now, 2023, things are so... People get so judgmental about things, and like they're so critical of things, you know. So we're recording this, and like 2 weeks ago was the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl's cool. I don't watch a lot of football. I think football is cool. I don't have like a favorite team, so I'm not invested. But I always watch the Super Bowl every year. And Rihanna was the halftime show, right? And love or hate Rihanna, like it was a pretty standard like halftime show. Some wild things happened. She did a lot of like snippets of her like biggest hits. But
was she lip syncing?
But like literally, the only things I've heard are like people are like, "Oh, that halftime show is so bad."
Right.
Like, this was, you know, they're so critical of everything. Rihanna was like on a platform like 50 feet in the air, and their first reaction...
Pregnant.
And their first reaction is, this was bad. This was just so bad. You know what I mean? And I think we're living in a culture where that's your first instinct is like, well, I know that this is okay, but let me like really point out the flaws. And truth be told, for a long time, I was in that camp about just everything. Like just, I would, you know, things that I'm not even good at. I would watch a movie and be like, well, yeah, but they should have done it this way. And it's, you know, I think it's great to have opinions. I also think it's great to understand when you hear somebody's song, to take a step back, understand that there's probably a lot of work put into that song, and some part of it means a lot to them.
Right.
Even if it's like a part that doesn't mean a lot to you, something has connected with them that they feel it's worthwhile to put this out into the world. And I feel like if the rest of us musicians and songwriters and creative people were a little bit more understanding of that stuff, it'd be way easier for younger songwriters to be like, yeah, I'll throw this out into the world.
Do that.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I think a little bit of that is like falls back to the audience, you know, and not being so quick to just rip things apart.
Right.
You know, because it's...
To be curious.
Yeah, because it's okay if a song is not the most catchy, if it makes you feel something. You know what I mean?
100% agree. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's where my chorus has to be catchy. I think that's where that comes from. It's like so many people have written songs that mean something to them, and you know, the producer or their friends or other musicians say, well, yeah, it's a good song, but can you make the chorus a little bit more like memorable? And don't get me wrong, there's like sometimes that is the answer. Sometimes like the answer to make that song cooler is, can I walk away from it still remembering this is what the chorus was?
Yeah.
However, that happens so many times from people who maybe don't even write that many songs. They're like, well, I don't remember any part of it. That I think then everybody wants to say, well, this is a good song, but it's not catchy at all.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's also by design, right? Our music culture has evolved into a singles culture. At one point, it was radio, and the word on the street was if you sent your song into some tastemaker, they would listen to 15 to 30 seconds and decide from there if it could, you know, if it was up to snuff. But there was at least one time where we had a little bit more of an attention span. And I'm not going to get into whether this is right or wrong. I'm still an album guy at heart. I don't typically like to pick and choose singles. I like to experience a whole work. But yes, our culture is also that. Release a single. If it doesn't move you in the first 15, 30 seconds, skip to the next one. Why? Because there's an unlimited amount of songs being uploaded to Spotify every day. Is it something like 100,000, maybe
it's
more?
Insane. It's
every
the first
day.
time I read it, like this past year, it's some, like whatever number you're thinking of, it is like double that.
Jeez.
Like it is a crazy number of music that gets uploaded every single day to Spotify. And it's hard. I also think, again, you're totally right. We don't need to get into all this stuff. Things like TikTok is a big source of music.
Yeah.
And TikTok a lot of times is like 15-second videos.
Yep.
So you're meant to like be pulled into music in 15 seconds. So if you have an idea that you want to write about that means so much to you, bro, you like the best songwriters in the world are going to have a hard time getting you there in 15 seconds.
Right.
You know? And I think like some of the most powerful songs I've heard in the last 5 years, you can't do that. Like you can't do the 15-second thing. Are there cool songs that you can take a 15-second snippet and it's awesome? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Do I think that happens for every good song? No.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into maybe kind of our last two things I wanted to touch on. And if we want to talk longer, we can. But you mentioned John Foreman. Is there another two or so artists who have really influenced you from the lyrics craftsmanship perspective?
Wow. You know, you'd think I'd be prepared with these things, but I haven't really thought about it. The one that always comes up that I don't even know if I listen to on a regular basis right now, but the one that's like always been there since like my early to mid 20s is the Beatles. In my early to mid 20s, so I mentioned earlier that I loved Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin in the 70s is like super musician band, right? Every musician is incredible. The songwriting, the music writing is great. The actual like the overall song and the lyrics is like, you know, I'm not exactly all those songs. I'm not going to sit down and play on an acoustic.
It was more about a feeling.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
even the vocals. I could care less what they're singing when I hear him sing.
Exactly.
I'm like, what is happening right now?
So when I was younger, you know, the draw of the Beatles is like the opposite. Like their musicianship across the board is not the same. You know, Paul McCartney is an incredible musician. John Lennon, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, like they're good. They're better than most people.
Shots fired, dude.
So like, okay, so hear me out. Like people who like the Beatles, you understand. Like if you dig deep, a lot of their like, you know, at the time guitar solos were a big thing. So While My Guitar Gently Weeps is a big guitar song. Most of that stuff is not George Harrison. It's mostly Eric Clapton. So you would like bring in another heavy hitter to do that stuff on their record that wasn't actually them, right?
Eric Clapton played that solo?
Mm-hmm.
Get out of here.
So like that kind of stuff, at the time when I was young, I was like, well, I'd rather listen to these bands because the guitar solos are cooler. Exactly. So then I would, you know, the more I got into like songwriting, then I started to understand this is why people say the Beatles are the best. I totally get it now. They have, you know, 10 full-length albums worth of songs that I want to sing along with right now. Like songs that I can listen to a time and be like, oh yeah, that song's awesome. You know? And I think then I started to dig into listening to all of their records and wanting to learn a lot of like their songs, even just like me and an acoustic, just like playing, you know, songs, you know, I mean, like classic songs like Let It Be and things like that, but also some of the like more goofy stuff on the White Album I really liked. And it wasn't necessarily about like these are the best musicians on the planet. It was more about together as a team they worked incredibly well with what they had and also just wrote. I mean, I think Paul McCartney said every day him and John Lennon would like try to write a thing. Yeah. Like every single day. And when you do that, like you're going to come up with some good ideas.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that they were always, since I started like really getting into songwriting, they were always up there. The other influence, I don't know, man. It's like always across the board. See, I like songwriter guys, but I also just love, you know, the kind of people who are I still love people who are the musician people first, and then they also happen to write songs. So, like for the past 5 years, like a person that I always end up listening to is like Stevie Wonder, like
nice.
like stuff like that, where it's like Stevie Wonder writes great songs. Also, though, he is just a stinking wild musician, wild man. Yes. So another like random fact: a lot of early Stevie Wonder albums where, well, I guess not super early, but stuff with like Superstition and like those records. It's shocking how many of the instruments he's playing.
Really?
That you're like, oh well, he's a piano player, so all the piano probably is him. But then you start like digging in, and you're like, did he play drums on this song?
Get out of here.
You know, like stuff like that, where it's like he did so much of that, and the idea of him just having that all in his head and just saying, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, is wild to think about. So there's a whole bunch. There's like a sea of people like that I love to listen to. Modern people.
Well, really quick, did you ever get into like the Laurel Canyon, like Carole King, Jackson Brown, any of those guys?
Okay, so I really like Jackson Brown. What actually drew me to Jackson Brown is I really like his voice.
Oh.
I just like the first couple times I heard like one of his songs, like the lyrics are. I mean, he's like really like known for being a songwriter, like lyrics and chord progressions and stuff. But man, I always just really liked his voice.
Yes.
So that was like the first thing that drew me in to like start digging into some of his discography. Just because I think one of the first, so a lot of people have heard like Running on Empty and stuff like that. One of the first songs that really drew me in was These Days. You know that song?
Oh, yeah.
And man, it's just, there's some like kind of weird chords in that song that aren't like, you know, super traditional. And then his voice, and then there's like I think one of the dudes in the Allman Brothers played slide on that song.
Oh, dude, the slide stuff in that is incredible.
And just all that stuff like really drew me into that. So definitely him, like I would be super into.
Well, I ask because turning our attention to your most recent work, which I will link to and encourage everyone to listen to, it has the best of a lot of my favorite things. It has country vibes, singer-songwriter vibes, like rock and roll, John Mayer guitar vibes.
There's a lot of stuff on there.
Well, it is, and so I can tell that you're certainly drawing from a wide swath of influences.
I think that like those kinds of things, I've mentioned this when I was talking a lot about when that record came out. I think that one of my, like, it's just a thing that I deal with that's good or bad, depending on how you look at it. In Come Wind, one of the criticisms that we always got when we talked to labels and things was, your genre is, like, too broad. Like, we don't really know what to do with this because it's, like, it's this, but it's that, and then it's a little bit of this other thing, too.
Boo!
Right? And I think it's just really hard for me to get away from that, of, like, I like a lot of music. I like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to just stick with with just one thing and be like, yes, I'm going to do 10 songs of this thing. And I like the freedom of, I'm just going to do whatever. And if I like this song more than the other one, then that's the one that's going to make it. The thing with the Blue Winter that I'm really grateful for is I really don't like social media and things like that, and I'm old enough now to know that for me personally, this is not a blanket statement for everybody. It's my life is a little worse when I'm like doing all of that stuff. So I don't like the promotion of like, oh, let me do this, 9-month thing of like, I'm really going to push my album on social media and stuff like that.
I agree.
And I think because I know that I don't care about that anymore, there's way less pressure of like, I have to get this album to listen to be heard by this amount of people. I still want that, but at the same time, like, I know that it, like, there's gonna be some people that hear it, and that's cool with me. And because of that, like, I don't super care about staying in the same lane the whole 10 songs.
Right. Your goals are different too.
Yes,
exactly. You're writing for you. You're doing it for you.
Right.
And with the hope that other people will connect. And I honestly think that the best records in the world have come from that space. Mm-hmm. Like, I am going to make something that moves me, and it ends up moving, hundreds of thousands of other people. That's the hope. And by the way, more people should listen to his record. We will link to it. You wrote, produced, and mixed it. Mm-hmm. Dude, you are insane. You mixed that.
So, I actually really like mixing. I think it's like I said, this is like the third or fourth time. I'm very introverted. Mixing is a weird thing where you just spend hours with a song by yourself and you just listen to it over and over, and then you keep saying, well, this could be better. And then, oh, this snare drum doesn't like hit me the way that I want it to. And I've run into some really fortunate things over the last like 10 years I think I told you this prior, but during COVID, so I do some stuff at my church, and I'm really thankful for those people. During COVID, pretty much every church in the U.S. was like, I don't know what to do. And one of the things we did, because me and one of the other guys have a bunch of studio stuff, was like, well, let's like record a couple songs every week, and just, they might not be the coolest things ever, but let's just do that. And then we can like send those out to our church people, and it's something that like we can stay connected with. And because I had to do that, that was like, I'm mixing really, really, really fast 2 songs like every single week for months. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I understand
I'm a mixer.
I understand this way more than I did 8 months ago. And then I kept trying to like immerse myself in that world. And yeah, mixing Volume 2 was actually, it was like a really cool experience, because I feel like I'm still learning so much about that process. But with that one, I felt like I had finally got to a point where it wasn't just, I need to make drum sounds that are good enough. I need to get to the point of where these drums sound presentable. I feel like it was beyond that, and now it was like, well, how do I make this guitar sound cool?
Really, yeah.
Like how do I make it
good?
Yeah, like how do I make it so it's like, oh, that's a cool sound. It's not just professional enough. It's like, oh, that sounds cool. And that was like a big turning point of now it's a little bit of mixing and a little bit of producing, where it's like, what is this, okay, so we have this part, this, drum part or bass part, or what's it going to sound like in the end? Like a little bit more being intentional about what's the tone of this instrument? What's the thing? So that was really fun to me, doing all that stuff.
Well, it sounds amazing, and most importantly, though, the songs moved me. I was listening to it in the studio today while I was setting up, crying. I relate to you because we're both dads and family guys, and we're trying to do the best we can with what we have, trying to share our hearts and trying to juggle getting things out into the world while not obsessing over making a name for ourselves. How do we do this and stay real? And I just think your record's beautiful.
Well, thanks, man.
And I don't want to tell anyone else how to feel. I wish I could go through song by song and say, dude, what drove you to write that? But I just want to recommend that people sit with this record, they listen to it, they appreciate the musicianship, the songwriting, Aaron's freaking voice, and the emotion that's happening in this record. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And
no, I've so like reverse shameless plug. I've known you for a really long time, and in a weird way, I don't even know age-wise if you're older, if I'm older.
I'm 33. How old are you?
I'm 33. So look at
nice.
that.
You are my same age. That is neat.
I've always admired from when I first met you guys in the band that you're in, like your sense of like, wow, dude, that even when I wasn't into songwriting, I was like, that dude can write some songs. Even like when we were way younger, and it means a lot to me that like you think that my record's cool. Like even now, it's like, oh, Kevin thinks this is cool. This is nice. That makes me feel cool. So I really appreciate that. It means
listening to it, I don't struggle with envy very often because it's a useless emotion. But when I do, it's I envy you.
Oh man. That's
so. So anyway, we're gonna turn off the camera so we can just keep on complimenting each other. But
do you know when this is coming out? This
next week, maybe.
Okay.
I think I did a pretty good job. I think this will be pretty uncut. So
sweet. I have a song that I just finished mixing and mastering that will come out as the Blue Winter on March 10th, whatever that Friday is.
All right, then that's when this will come out.
Sweet.
That's what I'll do.
And yeah, we were talking about mixing. It's one of my favorite mixes that I've done. I really love the song, but I've spent the last like 2 weeks listening to it and just tweaking it. And I'm really excited for people to hear it. So
can I get a preview today?
Absolutely.
The perks.
Yeah, dude.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you, man.
Dude, thank you. This is great.
We'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Deuces.